5 years ago, my friends and I used a Ouija board as a joke in my college apartment. What started as a game turned into 3 months of unexplained events that made two of us drop out of school and one person end up hospitalized. I'm breaking my silence now because what happened needs to be told, even if people think I'm crazy. My name is Sarah, and back in 2019 I was a sophomore at State University studying psychology. I considered myself a complete skeptic when it came to anything paranormal. Ghosts, demons, spirits. I thought it was all superstition and overactive imaginations. My 3 roommates felt the same way. That's why when one of us suggested buying a Ouija board from a thrift store as a joke for Halloween, we all thought it would be harmless fun. Something to laugh about while drinking cheap wine and pretending to be scared. But what happened over the following weeks changed all of our lives permanently and made me realize that some doors should never be opened. It was October 28, 2019. Just a few days before Halloween. My roommate Jessica found the board at a thrift store downtown for $5. It wasn't one of those mass-produced boards you can buy at toy stores. This was old, made of actual wood with hand-painted letters and numbers. The planchette was heavy, made of what looked like real glass with a metal frame. The store owner told Jessica the board had been donated by an estate sale. The previous owner had been an elderly woman who apparently collected occult items. Jessica thought that made it more authentic, and therefore funnier for our joke session. That night, all 4 of us gathered in our living room. Me, Jessica, our roommate Amanda, and Amanda's boyfriend Tyler, who was staying over. We lit some candles to set the mood, put on some spooky music, and set up the board on our coffee table. None of us really knew the rules for using a Ouija board. We'd seen it in movies, so we just copied what we remembered. We all placed our fingers lightly on the planchette, and Jessica asked out loud if any spirits were present. Nothing happened for about 30 seconds. We were all trying not to laugh, waiting for someone to admit they were pushing the planchette as a prank. Then it moved. It slid smoothly across the board to the word yes printed in the top left corner. We all looked at each other, each of us convinced someone else was moving it. Jessica asked who was pushing it, and everyone denied it, but the planchette was definitely moving under our fingers. Amanda suggested we ask it questions to see if someone was messing around. She asked what its name was. The planchette slowly moved from letter to letter, spelling out Zorath. I remember laughing at that point because it sounded like a name someone would make up trying to sound spooky. Tyler asked if it was a good spirit or a bad spirit. The planchette moved to good. We asked it several more questions over the next 20 minutes. Harmless stuff like how did you die and how old are you and why are you talking to us? The answers were vague and contradictory. Sometimes it spelled out actual sentences, other times just random letters that didn't make sense. The whole thing felt like an elaborate prank one of us was pulling, but I was watching everyone's hands carefully, and nobody seemed to be deliberately pushing. The movement felt strange, smooth but with slight resistance. Like the planchette was gliding on its own and our fingers were just along for the ride. After about half an hour, we got bored and decided to stop. That's when Jessica made a mistake that I think changed everything. She forgot to say goodbye. One of the supposed rules of Ouija boards is that you always have to move the planchette to goodbye before ending a session. It's meant to close the connection or door or whatever you opened. But we didn't know that rule, or if we did, we forgot about it. We just took our hands off the planchette and packed up the board. Nothing unusual happened that night. We went to bed around 1 a.m. laughing about our spooky Halloween experience. I remember thinking the whole thing had been silly but fun, and that was that. The first strange thing happened 2 days later on October 30th. Amanda woke up around 3 a.m. to use the bathroom and found every single cabinet and drawer in our kitchen open. All of them, the cabinets, the drawers, even the refrigerator door. But nothing had been taken or moved from inside them, just opened and left that way. She woke all of us up thinking someone had broken in, but our front door was still locked from the inside with the chain on. All the windows were locked. Nothing was missing. The only explanation was that one of us had sleepwalked and opened everything, but nobody remembered doing it. We closed everything and went back to bed confused but not particularly scared, just weirded out. The next night was Halloween. We went to a party and came home around midnight. When we walked into our apartment, The Ouija board was sitting in the middle of our living room floor, even though we'd put it away in Jessica's closet. The planchette was sitting on the board, positioned over the letter Z. That's when we started to feel genuinely uncomfortable. We asked each other if anyone had taken it out, but we'd all been together at the party. There was no way any of us could have set it up. Tyler suggested maybe someone was pranking us. We had several friends who knew where we kept our spare key. Maybe one of them snuck in as a Halloween joke. That explanation made sense and helped us calm down. But then things escalated quickly. Over the next week, all four of us started experiencing similar disturbances. We'd wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of knocking on our bedroom walls. 3 knocks, always in sets of 3, always around 3 a.m. It would last for a few minutes and then stop. Items started moving on their own, small things. At first, keys would be in different places than we left them. Phones would disappear and turn up in strange locations like the freezer or inside the bathroom cabinet. Then bigger things, furniture, would be rearranged slightly when we came home. A chair would be turned around or the coffee table would be pushed a few feet to the left. Amanda's boyfriend Tyler stopped staying over after he woke up one night and saw what he described as a dark figure standing in the corner of Amanda's bedroom. He said it was shaped like a person but made entirely of shadow, and when he turned on the light, it vanished instantly. He refused to come back to our apartment after that. Jessica started having nightmares every single night, always the same nightmare. She'd dream that she was lying in her bed unable to move, and something was standing next to her bed, whispering in a language she couldn't understand. She'd wake up with the feeling that someone had just been breathing on her face. I started experiencing sleep paralysis for the first time in my life. If you've never had sleep paralysis, it's a condition where you wake up, but your body is still paralyzed from sleep. You're conscious, but you can't move or speak. It usually lasts a few seconds to a few minutes, but my episodes felt different from typical sleep paralysis. I'd wake up paralyzed and feel a weight on my chest like something was sitting on me, and I'd hear that same whispering that Jessica described in her dreams. Quiet, urgent whispering in a language that sounded harsh and guttural. Amanda started seeing things during the day. She'd catch movement in her peripheral vision, dark shapes darting across doorways or appearing behind her in mirrors. When she'd turn to look directly, nothing would be there. After 2 weeks of this, we decided we needed to get rid of the Ouija board. We agreed that whether or not we believed in the paranormal, something was definitely wrong in our apartment, and it had started the night we used the board. Jessica looked up proper ways to dispose of a Ouija board online. Most sources said you should break it into 7 pieces, sprinkle it with holy water, and bury the pieces in separate locations. We didn't have holy water, and that seemed overly complicated, so we decided to just burn it. We took the board to a park near campus on a Friday night, November 15th. We dug a small fire pit, doused the board in lighter fluid, and set it on fire. We watched it burn completely to ash, making sure nothing was left. We all felt relieved as we walked back to our apartment, like we'd finally done something to end whatever we'd started. We were wrong. That night was the worst night of all of our lives. We all went to bed around midnight feeling cautiously optimistic. I fell asleep easily for the first time in weeks. But at exactly 3 a.m. I woke up to the loudest knocking I'd ever heard. It wasn't coming from the walls this time. It was coming from inside my room. The knocking was so loud it sounded like someone was pounding on wood with a hammer. 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks, pause, 3 knocks. Over and over. I tried to turn on my bedside lamp, but it wouldn't work. I reached for my phone to use as a flashlight, but I couldn't find it. The knocking continued, getting louder and faster. Then I heard my door open. I could hear the hinges creaking and feel the change in air pressure as the door swung wide, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness. Then I heard footsteps. Heavy footsteps walking into my room, across my floor, coming toward my bed. Each step made a sound like something heavy being dragged across the carpet. I was frozen in fear, unable to move or scream. The footsteps stopped right next to my bed. Then I felt the mattress compress like someone had sat down next to me. The weight was substantial, whoever or whatever it was heavy. Then I felt something touch my face. Fingers ice cold tracing across my cheek and down my neck. The touch was gentle but firm, and it felt completely real. Not a dream, not my imagination. Actual, physical contact. That's when I heard the voice right next to my ear, close enough that I could feel breath on my skin. It whispered one word in that same harsh, guttural language I'd been hearing during my sleep paralysis episodes. I still don't know what the word meant, but I'll never forget the sound of it. Then suddenly my lamp turned on by itself, flooding the room with light. And I was alone. The weight was gone, the cold touch was gone, the presence was gone. But my bedroom door was standing wide open, and I could hear screaming from the other rooms. I ran into the hallway and found Jessica and Amanda both standing in the living room crying and shaking. They'd both experienced the same thing. The knocking, the footsteps, something touching them, and a voice whispering in their ears. We were all terrified, but what happened next made us realize we were dealing with something beyond any of us understood. Because when we turned on the living room lights, we found something that shouldn't have been possible. The Ouija board was sitting in the middle of the floor. The same board we'd burned to ash 3 hours earlier. It was completely intact, not a single burn mark on it. And the planchette was positioned over the letters, spelling out a message, "You cannot leave." That's when Amanda started screaming and couldn't stop. She collapsed on the floor, hyperventilating and pointing at the corner of the room. She kept screaming, it's right there, can't you see it?" Jessica and I couldn't see anything, but Amanda was clearly seeing something that terrified her beyond reason. Her eyes were wide, her whole body was shaking, and she was making sounds I'd never heard a human make before. Pure primal terror. We called 911. Amanda was taken to the hospital in an ambulance, still screaming about something in the corner that only she could see. They admitted her to the psychiatric ward and kept her for 3 days. When she came out, she refused to talk about what she'd seen. To this day, she won't discuss it. Jessica and I stayed with friends for a week, refusing to go back to the apartment. When we finally did return to get our stuff and break our lease, we found the apartment completely trashed. Not like someone had broken in and vandalized it, but like a tornado had gone through. Furniture was overturned, picture frames were smashed, books and papers were scattered everywhere. But the strangest thing was the walls. Every single wall in the apartment was covered in writing. Hundreds of lines of text in that same harsh, guttural language I'd heard whispered in my ear. Written in what looked like black marker, covering every available surface from floor to ceiling. The landlord threatened to sue us for the damage until we showed him pictures of how we'd left it a week earlier. He agreed to let us break the lease without penalty, and as far as I know, he never rented that apartment again. That all happened 5 years ago. Jessica transferred to a different school and we lost touch. Amanda dropped out completely and moved back home to live with her parents. I finished my degree but changed my major from psychology to education. I couldn't handle studying the human mind anymore after experiencing something that challenged everything. I thought I understood about reality. We never found out what happened to the Ouija board. It disappeared from the apartment before the landlord saw it. Maybe someone took it, maybe it vanished on its own, I honestly don't know. And I don't want to know. I've done a lot of research since then about Ouija boards and spirit communication. I've learned that they're not toys, no matter how they're marketed. I've learned that there are specific rules for using them safely, and that failing to follow those rules can open doors that are very difficult to close. Most importantly, I learned that saying goodbye properly isn't just a superstition. It's not a game. When you use a Ouija board, you're potentially inviting something into your space, and if you don't close that invitation properly, it can stay. The entity we contacted, whether it was really named Zorath or if that was just a lie, it told us didn't leave when we burned the board. It stayed until it had completely terrorized us and driven us out of that apartment. And for all I know, it's still there, waiting for the next group of college students who think it's funny to play with a Ouija board they don't understand. I still have nightmares sometimes. Not every night like I did that November, but a few times a month I'll wake up at 3 a.m. and hear 3 knocks on my wall. I'll feel that cold touch on my face. I'll hear that whispered word in a language I don't understand. My therapist says it's PTSD from a traumatic experience, that the knocking and touching were probably always in my head, that we psychologically terrorized ourselves through a combination of fear, suggestion, and sleep deprivation. Maybe she's right. Maybe we did imagine all of it, but that doesn't explain the board reappearing after we burned it. It doesn't explain the writing that covered every wall of our apartment in a language none of us could read or write. It doesn't explain what Amanda saw in that corner that broke something inside her mind. I'm telling this story now because I've seen an increase in social media posts of people using Ouija boards as entertainment. TikTok videos, YouTube challenges, Instagram posts of people treating it like a fun party game. Every time I see one, I want to scream at them to stop, to tell them what can happen when you open a door you don't know how to close. Some people will read this and think I'm making it all up, or that we were just stupid college kids who scared ourselves. That's fine. Believe what you want. But if you're ever tempted to use a Ouija board, even as a joke, even if you don't believe in the paranormal, please remember this story, because the thing about evil is that it doesn't care whether you believe in it or not. It only cares that you open the door. Never use a Ouija board, and if you've had a similar experience, get help immediately.